I have the privilege to welcome Nirage from Altimetrik at the New York AI Partner Forum. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me as an ex-Googler as well. I'm super excited to be back into the campus. I am Nirage Negrani, Chief Data and AI Officer with Altimetrik.
It is truly a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
And before we get into the more formal questions, I like a little fun, easy one.
Let's do it.
What is one AI agent tool that you built for at-home purposes?
I have two agents that I run every morning. It's a skill that I've built. One is fundamentally gives me a real quick update on all the market trends happening with the frontier models, with the hyperscalers, and the data platform. That actually gives me a lot of juice into how the market is trending, what are some of the new features that are being implemented, because a lot of these features then eventually become a customer request for us to go implement them. Right. The next one is looking at some of our competitive advantages that we have in our services space, like where we are, leading, where we have gaps in our technical skills and capabilities. And those are some of the areas that I go focus on internally to improve our adaptability of customer zero of the tools.
It's brilliant. And out of curiosity, on that note, what are 2-3 features that you think that you've built today that would have never been possible that you would have dreamed of years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. The one that comes to mind is our ontology constructed conversational BI system that we actually built for a financial institution. The problem statement was, thousands and thousands of servers, and they were running across 4 isolated, disconnected legacy systems, right? So you think about SMDB in ServiceNow, the ITSM systems. You think about the ticketing systems, the performance data that are, stored in like PagerDuties, the Zendesks, the Datadogs of the system. And then you have the FinOps data, the BizOps data. And all these systems are super legacy, super isolated, right? And then a business user wants to run a query. I just want to know a system that is not performant, that we are spending as a business $10K per month.
Sure.
To manage that system, but it is missing all the SLOs. Super hard problem. You needed data engineers to actually connect with the business user to go run these pipelines across these isolated systems, right?
Sure.
What we did was we actually took all those hundreds, thousands of servers across these 4 isolated systems, put them into a medallion architecture across, Databricks for a financial institution, and we implemented the same use case across GBQ to actually for a digital e-commerce company. And fundamentally, what we were able to do was to then use the agentic system to go extract the metadata across all these systems, go build the ontology graph on top of it, and actually then use a conversational BI multimodal layer on top of it to run these queries. The effort actually went from weeks with these data engineers building pipelines to actually hours where a business user can now run a query for this digital e-commerce company on GBQ, and then for a medallion architecture on Databricks.
And you're exposing that to any line of business, any different persona.
Any line of business,
right.
Any query, it's a natural query. You're just prompting it. The prompt is taken by the ontology, converts into a SQL query against the lake.
It's fascinating. And look, I understand Altimetrik has primary verticals, but most of your plays are industry agnostic, correct?
Our biggest industry for investment from where we drive, we are about over $600 million in revenue, annual revenue. The biggest industry where 60% of our revenue comes is banking, financial services, and insurance. And the next 2 are life sciences, manufacturing, and then the retail. So we have a huge presence across these 4 industries that gives us about 90 to 95% of the revenue.
So in highly regulated sectors like banking or healthcare, scaling AI to thousands of seats is incredibly complex, right? And so how do you bypass the traditional compliance and integration roadblocks to get production agents into production quickly?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the key word there is bypass, which is not what our practice is, right? Yeah. When you think about regulations that, a lot of the life sciences, healthcare, banking have, there's a reason behind it. that you actually want these guardrails to be present there that actually helps the whole process to be well served for the right purpose. So I'll give an example. One of our healthcare implementations, they fundamentally asked us to come in and build a couple of agentic use cases that were highly governed use cases. They were automating one of 2 or 3 of their existing incumbent workflows. And they said, we want you to leave behind a blueprint so we can actually then use our internal skills to go build these agents. What we did was we first actually started to do an assessment of their entire governance ecosystem, their entire compliance ecosystem. And we got in touch. We started to partner very closely with their compliance officer, the security, the privacy, auditability. We actually documented all those assessments. Then we implemented a couple of agents that actually were put to test against this AI governance framework. Additionally, we defined our harnessing framework. This is where we looked at retrieval, evaluation, stress testing, red testing, and all that stuff. So we built an entire framework around harnessing. And then we used the same 2 use cases. We pushed them through those 2 guardrails. So we had the AI governance framework. We had the harnessing framework. Only when we were able to successfully put those 2 use cases in production, we built the blueprints, we left it behind so that they could build additional use cases, agents using those blueprints, right? We've seen the same implementation in our wealth management use case, where a lot of the requirements was around redaction. And you think about data privacy, think about PII information, sensitive data, you think about PHI or MNPI, right? A lot of that data that comes in, we actually built a 3-layered, very robust redaction system, which actually creates a tokenization of these PII sensitive information before even it actually gets ingested into the embedding system. Right. And, architecturally, humans in the loop for review, for confirmation is built into a design requirement into the architecture. When we think about a lot of the flow of data that's going through our systems, right? We want to make sure that we actually built in a lot of these checks that we have through evaluation, through tests, through the all these clinical requirements that actually go through, even for the AssetMark in the industry for the wealth management. We made sure that a lot of the PI information was redacted at the infrastructure level, at the data level, and then we built a 3rd custom layer to make sure nothing went out in the public information.
How do you guys approach? So obviously you have the expertise, the chops, the development chops, but for a lot of these banking financial institutions, how does Altimetrik approach change management, getting these laggard industries to approach your innovation thinking to accelerate that time to value?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? When we think about any industries that it's like, leapfrogging into building multi-agentic orchestration layer, our approach is, let us come and help you with our FDE deployment effort, right? There are a lot of laggard industries that actually want us to get involved pretty early in their phase of the maturity. So we actually have this agentic development and assessment framework, ADAF. And we also have a data assessment framework. We help them understand the entire data modernization transformation journey, where they are, right? This includes moving from legacy systems to decoupled modernization architecture through medallion architecture, right? And at the part of the data modernization, we help them implement the data governance and trust, and eventually conversational BI through data consumption. In the process of that journey, you end up understanding their business workflows. And this is where agentic implementation comes in, where you start to now understand their business flow, and you start to put a assessment framework for where we can identify their process, the business process, which could be revenue unlocking, it could be cost savings through OpEx, it could be speed and velocity. Yes, outcome, right? And in the process of building their agentic framework, we have implemented this AIOS framework that actually goes through this AI operating system framework that actually methodically goes all the way from experience layer to the context layer that thinks about the ontology, the semantic graph. It helps understand and build the architecture for the multi-agentic orchestration layer. that
Brilliant.
understands the access the agent should have to the system, whether it's using ADK, A2A protocol, right? And then we have an implementation in the governance layer that eventually gets into security, privacy, compliance, eventually leading into runtime operational excellence. So we actually have implementation across each of these layers as we go through the framework, and we help the client go through the entire journey from left to right, and we leave them behind, if they want to get into from the design to implementation. We have our data practitioner and AI practitioners team, which are like technical fellows, distinguished engineers, and then eventually follow with an FDE model that actually helps in deployment for the outcome-based results.
It's amazing. So I want to land with a punch. The final question that I have for you is, and you've mentioned a couple of customer examples, but like I want to hit the audience hard with a Halo customer story. Customer was blocked, they were stalled, they didn't know what to do. And how did Altimetrik help them overcome that?
Two use cases come to mind. One is with the wealth management company. They were actually blocked on the new fund launch process because the prospectus that requires to be delivered as a part of the fund launch is about 200 pages. And that prospectus has a lot of financial, legal, and marketing language. So you think about the financial numbers, the consistency of what the number shows up, like a 20% gross margin on page 2 and a 20% gross margin in a table on page 95 should match, right? There are 75 human checkpoints in the process. So to launch a fund requires 75 checkpoints by humans sitting either onshore or offshore that takes them weeks to get the prospectus done with a certain quality that goes through another round, right? So think about financial checkpoints, the financial consistency, the tone, the language, multi-language, multi-different countries have to launch it in different languages, and then the table consistency, and then the page numbers have to be consistent, right? So building a multi-agentic architecture here with an orchestration layer in the context actually helped improve launch for them, going to weeks to within hours, because we now have automated the entire process that actually looks for consistency. And instead of humans going through the entire prospectus, they actually look at only the inconsistent output from these agents, and they go do a quick fix on them. The second example is with a pharmaceutical company. So the pharmaceutical, which has a supply chain ecosystem. So, they have this batch manufacturing record, which fundamentally is another prospectus that actually looks at all the requirements and ingredients and the tests that were done to produce a batch of a product that's ready to be shipped, right? And then there is a COA analysis that happens, certificate of analysis that happens, a certificate that's given that you've met the benchmark, you met the threshold. We actually implemented multiple accelerators here that does a document extraction using semantic IQR graph. And when you actually do extraction of all the batch record document, which is 200 pages, and the certificate of analysis data, we have a rule book that actually was automated that would do a consistency check across the entire batch record for all the medicines and all the products, that they had met the threshold or there were violation of some thresholds, the testing was done, and that result gets extracted and produced through a multi-agentic architecture, but used to take weeks to almost a month, and now it's taking a couple of days.
My God.
Right? So the certificate of analysis approval only goes through one human check. Okay, you had 5 or 6 violations, you have to go through the entire process again, or this batch is ready for shipment. Here's your COA certificate.
So time savings, cost savings, accelerating time to value.
OpEx savings, speed to market. You talk about revenue unlock because now you can have many such batches that actually go out simultaneously. These agents are running in a multi-agentic environment across multiple of these BMRs that are getting issued multiple COAs at the same time.
It's incredible and truly a time to be alive and a wild time to be in this space. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. It's been truly a pleasure. I've learned a ton from Nirage, And thank you for joining us at the North America Partner AI Forum.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be back in the campus. And thank you, Brian,
Appreciate
for
it.
hosting.